Hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome to Live at the Waterhole, where first up, we're in the Madikwe Game Reserve of the Northwest Province of South Africa at the wonderful Jamala Waterhole. My name is Ralph Kirsten, and as per usual, please don't forget that this is a live and interactive experience, so we'd love for you to jump on board with us and send us through your questions and your comments. You can do that by going on the WildEarth website and registering. You can also join the conversation on X, formerly known as Twitter, and you can use the hashtag WildEarth, also on the YouTube live chat. Now, as per usual, it seems this last little while has been getting very hot, pretty much across the board, and so lots and lots of elephant activity. And it seems like today is no different. Starting out with a lovely breeding herd here at the Waterhole. So, what would you like to chat about? If it's any ecological principles or anything that you'd like to know about elephants in specific, it would be great for you to lead the conversation. So, send your questions and comments through. Seems to be a little bit windy. We can hear that sometimes on the camera, but it's still very hot, I'm sure. So speaking of the heat here and what it's going to do to the animals and make them all come down for a drink, let's go and have a look what the weather's going to be like across all the different locations. So just as I thought, it's going to be hot all round except in Tembe and at Oldonyo in Kenya. Tembe being in the KwaZulu-Natal province of South Africa and Oldonyo being up in East Africa. But the rest of them, a little bit of overcast. I see a Juma, but the rest of them going to be scorching hot. That does bode well for us, however, because a lot of the animals will come down to quench their thirst and cool off. Yesterday, there was lots of elephant activity as well, with many of them enjoying a pool party. We had quite a long conversation yesterday about the body language of elephants and how intriguing that is, using almost all of their body parts for communicating, and their kind of body language with their tails especially indicating their mood. And when they're swinging side to side like this, it does indicate a very relaxed animal. When they're stressed or anxious, that tail becomes quite stiff and normally heads out at a right angle. And then you can know that something's up. So in this particular spot seems to be the preferred drinking site for the elephants, because I'm pretty sure that that's where the water is filling up this little water hole. So at all the locations, that's what the elephants, or where they prefer to drink, is where the fresh water is coming out, because you can see, and with a lot of their activity in the water, it does muddy it up a lot. So I'm sure it changes the taste of the water as well. And who would want to drink muddy water if you have fresh water as an alternative? So, yellow duck. Animals can get sick from the water because it can house diseases like anthrax in particular. That's normally in the winter months when it gets a lot drier, and it sort of makes itself prevalent on the shoreline. They can also get some other diseases, but mainly their stomach acids is very strong. So it does need to be sort of diseases that'll make them sick rather than just the water. They can drink muddy water, elephants, but they just prefer the taste, I think, of the nice clean water coming through. So sorry for a couple of little breakups in the picture there. I'm sure just a bit of a technical issue that they'll sort out. So nice bit of vocalizing there from the elephant, trumpeting. It's not always sort of a problematic call. It can also be a call of excitement. And we're hearing a Deirdric's cuckoo calling there as well. And he tells you exactly what bird he is because he says, Deirdric's. Deirdric's. So, Jessie girl, what a wonderful start it is with elephants. And I'm glad that it brightens your day. It always brightens my day to see elephants in any kind of circumstance. But lovely to see them when they're having such a good time at the water holes. And this is when also different herds will meet up. So it's not always a happy affair. There can be a bit of consternation between them. But generally, they just enjoy the common purpose of coming here to drink and cool off. And unless there's a couple of boisterous bulls around, there's not really too much problem. Now, just researching a little bit on the diseases and going a little bit further around the roles of water holes, I found a lovely site of Ingwelala, which is a conservation organization, and a little write up from one of the researchers, Paige Ezzi. And she says that water holes play a vital role in regulating animal behavior and they influence the functioning of ecosystems. And some ecological effects that waterholes may have on the biotic factors around them include that waterholes are often the sites of animal conflict that I've spoken about quite a lot because the animals' territories normally overlap at waterholes, especially when it's dry, and then it does push a lot of them to come into the same area that they wouldn't normally. So there can be a lot of conflict then that arises because of that. And the number and location of waterholes, to a small degree, affects animal populations. This may explain why there are such high elephant, warthog, and impala numbers wherever you do have nice or a high prevalence of waterholes. Waterholes affect the distribution of animals for species such as impala, warthog, elephant, and waterbuck because they're so highly dependent on water. And sorry for that breakup there once again. So, as a result of the crowding of animals around waterholes, particularly in the dry season, there's a great contribution to injury frequencies. When the waterhole is made of concrete, as in a reservoir, animals like giraffe are vulnerable to slipping and breaking their legs when they bend down to drink. So it's important with artificial waterholes to make sure that it's not a very slippery surface. And with the introduction of artificial waterholes in national parks, they will add stones, etc., just to roughen it up and so the animals don't slip around. Waterholes are central points for animals in the dry season, and that also then attracts the predators. But waterholes are sites for the spread of diseases such as anthrax, as I mentioned, which is spread by animals that contaminate the soil and water. Such an example is vultures, which become infected with anthrax after consuming an infected carcass. When these birds congregate at waterholes, their feces pass on the anthrax spores into the soil and water. Many diseases thrive in moist conditions, and many are spread in the feces of animals that congregate at waterholes. With more hosts, the pathogens have a chance to spread. So, when the chemistry of the water at a waterhole is unbalanced, it can cause quite great health problems for the animals that drink the water. For example, a high concentration of salt in water has been known to lead to kidney damage in animals. And there was also the case of a high concentration of fluorine in some waterholes north of Pretoria at one stage. And this high concentration leads to the fractured legs of the African buffalo species. So it is interesting and obviously does play a big role in the health of different populations of animals in all the different game reserves that we visit.
Attention all teachers. Round up your bundles of joy and get comfortable because WildEarth Kids Safaris are here to stay. Go to our website and sign your class up for a special virtual safari with interactive learning tailored for kids.
Good afternoon or good morning, boys and girls from all over the world.
Spoil your kids with some wild fun for 1 hour every weekday on our afternoon drives. WildEarth, it's in your nature.
So I was just chatting on that little review from about anthrax and the diseases that you have at the Waterhole. But I spoke of the vultures and the potential of them carrying anthrax and passing it on to other animals through their defecations. But this is in fact incorrect because, according to new research, and I was actually involved with the project up in the northern part of the Kruger National Park in Pafuri, or the Makuleki concession, with a state vet, and he told me a lot about vultures, and the new um, evidence suggests that vultures actually digest anthrax. So, although they're not the most glamorous of birds, they're actually hugely important for human and ecosystem health. They play a vital role in preventing the spread of disease such as anthrax, regulating scavenger populations, and spreading nutrients across landscapes. They can travel over 200 kilometers a day looking for different carrion to eat. And once a carcass is found, vultures dispose of it quickly and efficiently. They've got very acidic stomachs that digest diseases like anthrax, tuberculosis, and rabies. And so they actually help prevent diseases from spreading to humans and other animals. They also reduce the amount of food available for other scavengers, such as flies, rodents, stray dogs, and keeping their populations in check. But vultures are, in fact, one of the most rapidly declining groups of birds in the world, and it's mainly due to farmers and livestock farmers that try to poison the predators such as lions, leopards, hyenas, and once a group of a vulture spots a carcass, they'll fly in, and there can be over 100 of them that feed on that carcass, and then they all end up dying. So it's an indiscriminate use of poisons that is probably the biggest threat to vultures, and we're literally shooting ourselves in the foot because then that results in there being an increase in the likes of tuberculosis, rabies, and anthrax. So I wonder if this group now is finished with their little drink. They might be hanging around somewhere else, but it does indeed look like the departure has begun. Alrighty, so now that the elephants are leaving, I think we'll do exactly the same on their cue, and let's head over to Namibia and the Etosha National Park. Carrying on the theme once more at Okokuyu with a nice elephant bull, it looks like, here at the Waterhole. Lots of springbok, as per usual, and the odd oryx or gemsbok, blue wildebeest. A little bit late in the morning to see any sandgrouse, but you might hear them. You can hear the croaky call of a pied crow, a resident here too. Where's a giraffe moving in the tree line just in the background? Maybe gonna make inroads towards the waterhole. So, Rainy England wants to know if the elephants are given names. Rainy England, we tend to try not to give, most of the wild animals names, for the pure reason that, then we start to get attached to them as humans. That's, it becomes emotional, and obviously then, if the animal dies, which is really a part of nature for whatever reason, then there's a lot of heart soreness, etc. So we tend not to, and generally in national parks like this, they would uh, specifically for research purposes, as well as just the movements of the elephants, the dominant bulls. Some of the matriarchs, they could be sort of identified as those individuals and then given a code name such as H1 or E7 or whatever it might be. Sometimes, if they're very prominent, then they may be named, like some of the desert elephant herds. Obviously, the first bull that moved back into the northwestern areas from the north, his name was given Voortrekker, pioneer, as he did pioneer the sort of movement of the desert elephants back into the Damaraland area around north of the Brandberg. So, and then there was a very prominent herd, a breeding herd, and the matriarch was called Mama Africa. So it was Voortrekker and Mama Africa that sort of got those populations back up and running. So yes, those ones given names, and also with the desert elephants being so important.
A change in season affects us all, and WildEarth likes to help our global family keep up with the times. The end of October will see Europe and the UK shift an additional hour behind, and the start of November will see the US shift an additional hour behind. Stay connected to nature and your favorite shows with these new times. Don't miss a moment with WildEarth.
Now, something interesting, and just going on with that naming of elephants, and I found something on earth.com, and they say that although personal names have always been considered exclusive to humans, a recent study led by the Colorado State University has now suggested that wild African elephants might use distinct calls, the equivalent of elephant names, to identify each other, paving the way for novel insights into language evolution. So it seems we're not the only ones that call each other names. Elephants do it as well. And this amazing study, which examined the calls of wild elephants from two Kenyan regions in the Samburu ecosystem in the north and the southern Amboseli National Park. And they gathered about 625 calls, and family groups exchanged 597 of them within the same group. They identified 114 unique initiators and 119 unique recipients of those calls. And the analysis was confined to calls aimed at a single individual elephant, thus ensuring the recipient's identification or the elephant's name. So, to determine if the call could predict the receiving elephant's identity, the researchers assessed the elephant's acoustic characteristics and subjected the data to a series of statistical tests. It obviously all gets very technical, but the findings were compelling. According to the study's lead author, receivers of calls could be correctly identified from call structure statistically significantly better than by simple chance. So what they actually did was the experts selected 17 elephants and played recordings of calls addressed to them to observe their response. And further supporting the existence of vocal labels, subjects approached the speaker more quickly and vocalized more quickly in response to test playbacks than control playbacks. In other words, placebos or other calls. So the elephant social structures offer some insights into this amazing behavior, which could non-human species using a naming system akin to humans to refer to their conspecifics. That's incredible. So bush barbie, yes, the desert elephants do regularly dig for water. I've come across this on numerous occasions, especially the older, more experienced within the groups, the big bulls, as well as the females within the breeding herds. And in the ephemeral rivers that sort of cut Namibia all the way through, from right up in the north, near to the Kuneni River, all the way down even towards the Tsochab River, which is also was also an ephemeral river that led to the sea, but now it's obviously closed off at Tussusvlei by the dunes. But everywhere north of Swakopmund, all of those ephemeral rivers that run into the ocean, when I say ephemeral, they only flow after it rains on the surface, but they're flowing all year round under the ground. So the rivers are actually flowing where the bedrock is, and wherever the bedrock comes close to the surface is where it sort of comes out and almost looks like a spring, but it is flowing. It's sort of pushed to the surface and then it goes down again under the ground into the porous sand and then carries on flowing underground. But if the water table is rather low, which it can happen if it doesn't rain for a few years, which often happens as well, then that water is flowing a little bit below the surface of the soil, and the elephants can smell where that water is, and it's normally in the berms or the bends in the river, and where there would be rocks there as well that the elephants then go there and dig. And the sometimes cattle as well as donkeys, they also assist in keeping those holes open that the elephants initially dig. Sometimes they can be up to 2 meters deep, these holes, that they use their feet to kick the dirt out. And then they obviously smelling that they're getting closer and closer. And also, very often, what they do too is even if there's a muddy pool of water, they'll dig next to it, and then they get fresh water. And so then they drink that, with their preference being for nice, clean drinking water. So the answer is yes, elephants dig for water, and I think it's quite extreme with the desert adapted elephants in particular. Right. So it's always busy here at Okokoyo, but it seems like there's a little bit more elephant activity back at Jamala. Either a few that have returned or a couple of stragglers from the group that was here earlier. So we're speaking about desert elephants. With obviously these are not desert elephants, but they live in a semi-arid environment in the very close to the Kalahari here on the border of Botswana in the Madikwe Game Reserve. But chatting about the desert elephants and Namibia's desert adapted elephants form an essential part of Namibia's biodiversity heritage and balance in the desert ecosystem and annual revenue through tourism for the country. So the presence of elephants in the desert is vital to the local environment as well as they dig for water, as we spoke of, making these resources available to other animals, and their deep tracks in the mud during the short rainy season are said to provide an ideal environment for seedlings for plants as well. And in recent years, these desert elephants have experienced a constant population decline. And this is according to Elephant Human Relations Aid, or ERA, which is a non profit organization that sort of help in alleviating the conflict between human and the desert elephant populations, which occur in these desert regions. I've worked closely with them as well, with volunteers there, as well as tracking the elephants too. So it's worth having a look at ERA. It's EHRA, Elephant Human Relations Aid. Always lovely to watch the interactions between the elephants. And now looks like a bit of a boisterous bull, and that's entered here. See that head shake that we were speaking of yesterday as well, with the ears that form part of their body language. And that normally is quite an aggressive sign when they do that head shake like that. But it looks like this big bull on the right here, he's having none of it and won't be intimidated by any of these youngsters. So it's interesting to note as well when there was a lot of relocation of animals to the Pilanesberg National Park. When they first did that, they reintroduced elephants, but they only brought in young bulls, I think from the Kruger National Park. Um, and they had a very big problem in the beginning because these young bulls were very boisterous, they were very aggressive, and they started to kill some animals, and in particular black rhinos. For some reason, black rhinos are very aggressive, and so maybe they were clashing with those bulls. as they were coming into must, because they're not scared, they don't back down. And so these young bull elephants were killing a number of black rhino. And there was, for quite a long time, they didn't know what to do. And then they decided to relocate some older bulls, which is exactly what they did. And immediately, just with their presence, it calmed those younger bulls down, and they stopped killing the black rhino. So it's just interesting to note how the presence of a nice old experienced male elephant can just settle the whole herd. And those dynamics are important to have different age groups within the populations.
The expert in anything was once a beginner. November 17th is International Students' Day. Join us as we have budding naturalists learn from our wildlife experts on Drive. Come along as we demonstrate various critical guiding techniques, from good communication to tracking. Find out about all the tips and tricks and earn your safari stripes. Don't miss out on the fun. Wild Earth, it's in your nature.
the effect of having a lot of artificial water holes in an area, I don't think would have a negative effect on the animals per se. Initially, on the short term, much more of a problem and an issue for the flora, because the animals would frequent water holes. And they trample in the areas. They also overutilize the plants that are directly adjacent to those water holes. So, water hole placement is very important in the management of a natural area. Um, and what we do as conservationists, and in the planning of that, you would normally do felt surveys, and you'll place your water holes, which can handle much bigger sort of utilization, and areas that are normally underutilized. And so you then force the animals to go to those areas. And we do have a lot of plants that actually react positively to utilization. So it can actually benefit the area if you put your water holes in those spots. If you put it in a sensitive area, obviously you can have a lot of trampling, a lot of erosion, losing of the topsoil, and to the detriment of the plants that don't like to be utilized very much. So yes, it's very important, the placement of the water holes, and obviously the amount of water holes as well. Suppose what you ultimately want to have is enough water for the animals, but just chosen scientifically and with reason, not just randomly placing water holes, because it can have a really detrimental effect to the ecosystem. Looks like these bulls might go now and enjoy this water hole a little bit more this morning, which is great news. Maybe there'll be some swimming and flopping about in the mud. See, and that's what they like doing. The muddier, the better when they're spraying that water on themselves, because it sticks and then it keeps them cooler for longer as opposed to just water. So they have a real preference for the muddier, the better. You often see them kicking it with their feet, their front feet, and making it as muddy as possible. So, Gareth, you want to know the difference between a mock and a real charge from elephants. So, we've actually in recent years changed the name from mock to warning charge, because it sort of just does lead more to the actual um, kind of charge when it's not for real. So, a warning or a real charge. And a warning charge can change into a real charge halfway through. So it's important to always treat it as a real charge. However, you can expect, when an elephant charges at you with its ears out, trying to make itself look as big as possible, also with its head up, it's really trying to stand imposing, and trying to sort of scare you off, and not necessarily follow through with the charge. So, and they also make a lot of noise when they do that. So that's what we would more so look at a mock or a warning charge. Ears out, head up, making lots of noise, and normally sort of charging at you, backing up, charging at you again. So it can be multiple charges, really trying to intimidate you. When it's a real charge, which, as I say, can change halfway through, um, the ears will be back, the head will be down, and they'll be silent. They'll just be coming straight at you. So that's, yeah, when you start saying your prayers. No, but I've had both those kind of all three actually. The mock or warning charge, the real charge, as well as halfway through changing. Luckily for me, I've been able to sort of divert the attentions of the elephant on all occasions, to leaving us alone. So sometimes it's just a tap on a metal surface. I've done it on my rifle, which is obviously there ultimately to protect the group. When I walk in South Africa, in Botswana, Namibia, we don't walk with rifles, so in which case I've clapped my hands, and in all instances you need to stand your ground, because running away from an elephant can actually invoke a charge, or it will make the elephant change a warning charge into a real charge. And so you always stand your ground. I know it's difficult, easy to say and difficult to do, but if you ever find yourself in that situation, which you normally wouldn't without a qualified and experienced guide such as myself to protect you and show you the way, um, then you need to stand your ground, and even just raising your arm up with if you have a stick, a walking stick with you, you can even just raise that up in the air. But generally as quiet as possible. As I say, sometimes I have had to shout, and that's more so in the instance when it has been a real charge or it's been perceived as such by me. I've shouted at the elephant just to give an aggressive response to say that we're not going anywhere and we're not going to take his nonsense. And it's managed to be able to stop it. And I've had hundreds of elephant encounters. So, and it really goes to show, I have a wonderful example of this, that you need to stand your ground, because if you run, it actually invokes more aggression within the elephant. Um, that in Damaraland, near to Twyfelfontein, the desert elephants come through there. That's a famous UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Bushman engravings in the sandstone rocks there. The desert elephants move through that area. It's just off of the Abahuab campsite, and part of the greater Huab riverine system, ephemeral rivers, remember. So there were two of the staff members that were walking along the gravel road. There's no fences there, and the desert elephants move freely. And they happened upon a bull elephant in front of them. He was walking towards them, and they obviously were walking towards him. When they saw it, they both turned around and they ran. The elephant charged, and as these two guys were running, one of them fell down on the ground, and he just put his arms over his head because the elephant was, coming up behind him. He put his arms over his head. The elephant ran past him and flattened the guy in front that was still running. So the sole survivor was the one that obviously, eventually, as not by choice, he stood his ground. Well, he lay on the ground. But the elephant wasn't concerned with him, concerned with the one that was still running, and flattened him and then continued on its way. So I think that that's a great example of the kind of behavior that you need to have in front of elephants. You don't want to be intimidating to them. It's obviously nice and quiet. And especially if you see them at night, they're definitely not to shine a torch on elephants. It's the only animal that you shouldn't. All the other animals, you shine your torch straight in their eyes, but that does irritate elephants, and it can actually, make them become aggressive. Um, and if an elephant is nicely calm, relaxed, definitely not to clap your hands. I've seen examples of that in mana pools where it's unfenced as well, and the elephants are able to move through the campsite. It's on the banks of the Zambezi River. And I've seen multiple examples of elephants coming into camps, and yes, they can sort of damage things. They can pull on the tent and sometimes get into the food on the table and knock glasses over and all sorts. They don't have a very good table manner, to elephants. So obviously, people want to try and usher them out because they're going to cause damage. Not always, but they can do. So, seen people clapping their hands, and then immediately the elephant goes, towards where the person is clapping their hands and going after them. Still very calmly, but it does attract their attention, and it can invoke aggression. Clapping your hands, it should only be in the point where you're trying to change the elephant's mind. And if he's being very calm inside your camp, unfortunately, you're going to have to just let him move through your camp and be quiet and just move on to the other side of the vehicle as he comes around, or go behind a tree, etc., and just stay out of his way. You need to try and pick it up early if they're coming towards your camp. Just pack everything away in the car, and then you can enjoy the show as the elephant walks through your campsite. So that's a much better way. But definitely do not clap your hands with a nice, relaxed elephant, because it can make him a bit irritated. And yeah, it's only when elephants are being naughty that you want to just try and change their mind.
Hickory dickory dock, the kids ran to the spot. The clock struck 4, the kids sat down, hickory dickory dock. Our kids safaris bring interactive entertainment and learning to the future protectors of our world for 1 hour every weekday during our safari drives. Watch it live on your nearest device. Don't miss out on the fun. WildEarth, it's in your nature.
There's the one bull there. He's the one furthest away from us, and he's looking away from us on the opposite side there. I think it's the same one as yesterday, and probably I think this is the same group of bulls that we heard yesterday too. He's got a kink in his tail, and I'm not sure how that would have happened, but that's a nice identification feature on an elephant itself. So, for in this instance, when we say, do we name elephants? Well, we'll just nickname him Kinky Tail, I think there was a lion also on Juma who also had a kinky tail. There you can see it's like a lightning bolt on the left there. That's quite a strange feature, that. And then we'll just use that as a way of identifying him, just with a nickname, not necessarily officially naming animals, but nice feature that he's got for us. He seems to know that we're talking about him and his tail, and he's flexing it nicely for us. So remember what we said yesterday. If you did watch, when elephants, they lift their trunks up, sort of curled up over their forehead and then pointing in a specific direction. They are then smelling in the direction that the end of the trunk is facing, um, picking up maybe there's other elephants approaching, maybe there's predators, whatever it might be. And we often see when we walk on foot as well, as soon as the wind blows towards the elephants from us, they immediately all pick up their trunks like that and start smelling in our direction. And then, yeah, from there, they either move away from you generally or come towards you. They can be inquisitive, or they can want to also push you out the area in the case of some of the breeding herds. So it's always important to note if they are taking interest in your direction, especially when you're on foot. So, Jody, are elephants a keystone species? Absolutely. They're one of the sort of biggest keys within the keystone species because um, they are able to literally change the entire environment around them. If there's too many of them, you can have major deforestation, you can have high erosion, you can have trampling, and they're obviously bulk feeders as well. So they have a very high impact on the ecosystem and the environment that they live in. If there's too many of them, big problem. And also, if there's none of them where they normally were, the ecosystem also suffers as a result. Because you can imagine the amount of food that they eat, and they defecate a lot of the during the day, and they transport that it's sort of semi broken down plant material, and then full of moisture and water as well, and that is then available for a lot of invertebrates, arthropods. That find their homes in there. A lot of the plants grow out of that dung because they feed on a lot of seeds, etc. So they're important for seed dispersal. They're important for little microclimates that they create in the dung balls that they drop all over the place. Um, and then, as a secondary result, a lot of animals go in search of the dung, the elephant dung, for food. The likes of guinea fowl, mongoose, and all sorts of birds that go scratching about in the dung for the invertebrates that are making their homes in there. Some invertebrates make their home inside the dung. Some of them transport it away. Some of them go in the soil underneath. So massive impact do elephants have, and a big impact if they're not there when they naturally were as well. Also, a lot of the game paths that they make, then utilized by a lot of the animals. If there's bush encroachment from sickle bush and sometimes mopani, and a lot of the acacia species of Vachilia, the elephants help to maintain those routes open. And without the elephants, so quite similar to what the hippos do within the Okavango Delta, and keeping channels open that the water then constantly flows. Otherwise, it would block up and change the whole dynamics of the Okavango Delta. So elephants keeping these areas open, it does then assist the other animals to a very big degree. Yeah, looks like we've got a bit of a breeding herd now that's arriving. Here's mommy with a nice little baby calf. She might be a little bit nervous with all these bulls around, especially with that little baby she's got. But we'll see what happens. It's maybe why she's taking her time. Looks like some more arriving. We'll see what interest the bulls pay in them. So just one taking interest in them for now. A little bit of tactile greeting ceremony there as she arrived. She's just protecting that youngster, and the other one staying close too. Well, look at that. She's rubbing up against that male. Always interesting when, especially when there's greeting ceremonies and tactile communication. I love watching elephants. But we've spent quite a bit of time here. I don't think these elephants are going to go anywhere. So let's just pop back to the Great White Place. And it seems our giraffe that was trying to make its way down has finally gotten there. And there's a whole line of giraffe on their way. So this might turn out to be quite spectacular. So, and I was giving reasons earlier why elephants are definitely keystone species. They're one of the sort of most important of the keystone species. And you might be wondering what a keystone species is. And they're those that provide vital ecosystem services, which are essential for the survival of other species in an ecosystem. Without keystone species, those said ecosystems would be negatively affected or could even cease to exist without them. So I suppose keystone species assist in balancing natural ecosystems and all the different and the biodiversity, really. Other examples, like I was saying earlier, hippos, definitely keystone species, especially in waterways, like the likes of the Zambezi and the Kavango leading into the Okavango Delta. Probably also very important in the Masai Mara, the Mara River, the Sand River. So, yeah, lots of these rivers that are very important to have the presence of hippos. Another one, rhinos, particularly white rhino, but black rhino as well, more so in the thickets. White rhino more out on the grasslands, with the massive middens that they make and the amount of food that they graze. Very important species as they do modify and change the environment and help with that balancing act and create micro habitats and keep that biodiversity of different ecosystems at large. So, Bonnie Girl, rocky landscape and benefits to the animals. Yes and no. As we see there, just look to the right. There's another Corey Bustard that has come down to drink. Nice to see. We've been seeing them quite a lot. So yes and no. For most of the animals, it just makes it difficult for them to move around. Not easy for a giraffe to walk around on these rocks. Very easily trip and fall. And I can tell you, I've walked in these areas just outside of the Etosha National Park, and it's difficult because you're stepping over rocks all the time, and they're quite jagged rocks, being calcrete. They're easily weathered, and so they have a lot of sharp edges. Um, so yeah, it does make it difficult for movement. But then once game paths are established, between the rocks, obviously, then it's not so much of a problem. But you need to use those game paths. Um, I think the major importance of it does provide cover for small predators. I see the jackals often hunting, and they use the rocks as cover as they move in to hunt sandgrass and doves when they come in the early morning to drink. Normally around sunrise is when you see the jackals hunting here along the edge of the water. So yes, it does provide cover, and it will also provide a lot of cover for lots of arthropods and invertebrates. The likes of scorpions will be under the rocks during the day, and they come out to hunt at night, and lots of other different beetles and all sorts that will live under the rocks. So I think more on a microclimate level and micro ecosystem level, as well as a little bit of camouflage to predators as well. So you'll see all the animals use the game paths because it is tricky to walk, as I've mentioned. But if a predator appears, obviously they're not just necessarily going to run down the game path. They're going to run in the opposite direction of the predator, and that's when you can often see them tripping and falling, and it's not easy. And here comes our lion journey of giraffe. Okay, so continuing the theme of keystone species, we spoke of a couple of them, but a lovely article on the Getaway website, which is a South African publication. They say keystone species are vital for the functioning of an ecosystem, where the landscape of an environment would be completely altered without them. Yet, for some reason, the term is foreign to many. Derived from construction jargon, a keystone is vital in the construction of an arch, and without it, an arch would ultimately collapse. Keystone species play a vital role in ecosystems in maintaining their ecological integrity. Without them, the architecture of an ecosystem would also collapse. In the US, the reintroduction of wolves in the Yellowstone National Park increased the beaver population and altered the waters of the park, and even decreased soil erosion along the park's water banks. So we would definitely say then that wolves are a keystone species. And to shine the light on
African brings the wild to you. Watch the big 5 at our Waterhole cameras. Indulge your passion for birding with the black eagles on the Black Eagle camera, flamingos at Camphors Dam, and penguins at Stony Point. Listen to the soothing sounds of Lisbon Falls, or witness animals up close at Cat Eye Pan. Imagine you're at the hide at Aldonyo Lodge, gazing at elephants with the majestic Mount Kilimanjaro as your backdrop. Join us at Africam for an extraordinary wildlife adventure.
And without them, as the name suggests, it would fail to exist or would change completely. So, Gareth, you thinking giraffe look like very big antelope? In fact, they're not. And I'll go in. That's a lovely question because it's all about horns and hooves. And I'm just going to pull up a little bit of research and we'll dig into that a little bit better. But no, not part of the antelope family. So these waterholes that we've been at are all part of the WildEarth waterhole cameras, but we do have a lovely collaboration with Africam as well, and we'll be introducing those cameras.